I have a problem. I love blind boxes. I love buying them, I love opening them, I love trying to guess what's inside and spending all of my hard-earned money on them. That being said, I am also an artist and I have also recently been exploring 3D modeling, and I've really wanted to get into toy making and especially blind boxes because I just think you can have so much fun designing them, and I've been inspired by a lot of other artists that I've seen online lately.
What's up, guys? Today we're back with another blind box unboxing. Today we have the Happy Sweet Time series. You can see the potential pulls and cheese figures here. I've never gotten one of these figures before, so I would like to think anything I get would be happy with, but oh my god! So cute! Choco Muffin Rico! Welcome to the world! Welcome.
So I am making my own blind box series based off of my cat Dorito and breaking it down into episodes which include the modeling, the printing, the mold making, and so first things first, I had to figure out which poses I wanted to make. My goal was to have a blind box series of 5 figures, 4 being like the regular ones, and then one. So looking through my many Dorito photos with his help, of course, I eventually settled on 5 poses. The belly up pose, the classic cat loaf pose, the long pose, the face down pose, and lastly, the rare one, the sitting Dorito. So, with all of those poses in mind and reference photos gathered, I'm going to jump right into the modeling process of it all. Because this is more about the blind boxes themselves, I'm not going to be going as in-depth or step-by-step with my modeling process, but if that is something that you're interested in, please just let me know, and I can make a more detailed, maybe even a tutorial video on how I approach things in this 3D program. The 3D program that I use is a free browser-based program called WOMP. There is a free version and there is a paid version. I personally use the paid version, but you can use pretty much all of the features with the free one. So anyway, as I am designing these, I have a couple things that I'm keeping in mind. So as far as printing goes, I want them to be relatively simple, just composed of these like simple round kind of blobby shapes, just so it's easier to print and paint, and also so I don't have a lot of details getting lost in my model making, because my goal is to model these in WOMP, get them printed, and then make molds of them using silicone and resin. So for that whole process to be effective, I feel like they need to be relatively simple, and then the little details can be added through the painting. To keep these looking pretty uniform, what I have done is, after I am happy with the first pose, which I believe I did, I kind of hopped around honestly between all of them just because that's how I tend to work. But once I found a head shape and a tail shape that I was pretty happy with, what I would do is I would copy and paste it from the previous model onto the new pose that I was working on, and then make slight adjustments to fit the model itself, but ultimately doing that so it keeps the uniform look of them all, so they all have the same head shape, it's all going to be the same size, and just so it just looks more uniform. So now that I have the modeling done, I don't technically have to do this before moving into the printing stage, but this is just more for my own visualizations to understand how it's going to look, is that I'm doing a color test just to see, the colors that I might want to use and like how detailed I want the paint job to be. So usually how I do this is I go into the WOMP settings and I turn the toon shader feature all the way up, just because that's also how I like to paint things. I am not the best painter, so I don't really want to get into the nitty-gritty with like mixing colors and shading and soft gradations and all that stuff. So just like flat cell shaded is the direction that I want to take for this. So then from there, looking at my own Dorito pictures and also him sitting on my lap because he has been with me for most of this process, I'm making color decisions based on that and trying to keep the color scheme to a max of like 3 or 4 colors. One of my favorite things about Dorito is his wide variety of silly poses, so it was a bit hard to choose. Kind of like that one Kind of like those cats in Neko Atsume, that face plant. I didn't realize that cats did that until I got him. And then the final pose, which is the rare slash mystery one, is him sitting. Ever since I've gotten Dorito, from the very, very first day that I've had him, he has done this from time to time, and it's so strange and it's so funny. So it would not be a Dorito series without having that pose. Now that is all done, we have all of our Dorito poses. Don't look! They're you! They're you! I think that they are really fun interpretations of these poses that I have seen him do that will also translate really well to a printed figure. So to go over the 3D printing process, like how to prep your model, I feel like these things can extend to other softwares, but I am using WOMP, so I'm just going to be talking more specifically about that. So at least with this service, the thinner the print is, the cheaper it is to print, but also just to be aware of, if you make it too thin, then it might become too brittle and it might break in the printing process. So there is definitely a bit of a fine line that you have to walk with it. Overall, because mine were not super complicated, I didn't really have too many issues where I was worried about it being too thin and breaking. How you can do it in WOMP is you select the object that you want to make a 3D print of, and then you go into the print mode, and then from there it will give you the options, like you can hollow out certain things, which will apply just like a uniform hollowness to everything, and then you can go into the different areas. Like for example, like the body is separate from the tail, so the tail would have a different thickness, because if the tail was too thin, then it probably would break, and stuff like that. So there is a lot of personalization, depending on what it actually is that you're trying to model. And I really like that you can see these almost like x-ray views, these structural health things. So you can kind of see where potential problem areas may be, or maybe areas where you could simplify things, and also just seeing how your model actually looks. Something else that I have learned since just beginning to get into 3D printing is that you need to have drain holes in them. And basically, what they are, this little diagram probably does a better job of showing it. Like if you're making a person, it's probably a good idea to put drain holes on the feet so things don't get caught. And it also just helps with the overall integrity of the model and just maintaining that sort of thinness that you want it to have. So now that the prints are all ready and they're being sent off, I'm going to use the in-between time to work on exploring different packaging things. So I've made a mock-up of what a potential box design could be, just looking at a lot of different examples of other blind boxes. And also, I know that most blind boxes have little cards on the inside for whichever one that you got, so I made those as well, which I think are very cute. They have the pose, and then they have just a little silly blurb at the bottom, some branding on the back with a QR code. I do think that it was a good idea to try and explore different packaging and things. I don't really feel like I fully got it right necessarily. I definitely feel like the design I really like, and I do think that is the right approach. But as far as the actual dimensions in the box, I'm still not totally sold on that. I think it was just cool to explore the packaging, and because it just really brought home that, like, oh, this is a tangible 3D object that I am making. Then after making all of the little gotcha cards, I round off the corners just because I like how that looks. And then as far as making a mock-up of the box, I recently got this scoring board for greeting cards, and then realized that it would be super helpful in this situation. So yeah, I'm basically lining up the corners and then scoring it so it's easier to fold and then assemble. Definitely whenever you're making something with like resin or silicone, please, please, please make sure that you actually have like the stuff that you need. Not just like the materials required, but also making sure that you have a respirator mask, just like one of these. Just wear it when you're working, because the fumes are not great. I kind of have to do all of this in my bedroom. I don't really have an alternative space to use this. I would love a studio, but that is not really financially in the cards right now. So, usually, what I do when I was making these is that, first of all, if you have any pets, make sure that they are not in the room. So, I would make sure that the cats were not in the room. Close the door. Mainly when I was working on these, it was a bit warmer, so I would open the windows. I would still recommend doing that just so it's like you're not, trapping all of this stuff inside with you. And then, yeah, wearing gloves, a mask, and then I got these like those little popsicle sticks that basically just function as like stirrers. So you really don't want any direct contact with this stuff because it is toxic. So but yeah, I mean, really, once you have all that stuff, I would say that it is pretty straightforward and self explanatory. There is a bit of a learning curve. Like, I'm sure that I can probably, the next time that I do this process, I feel like hopefully I will have improved and learned some like tips and tricks. But yeah, essentially, you just mix equal parts A and B together. That is the same for both the silicone part and also the resin part. So you mix those two together and then you pour it into its respective thing and then you let it sit and cure for however long it says on the packaging, depending on what you get. Like certain things have like faster cure times or slower. So I don't really know the differences between them. I'm not totally sure. Like, I mean, I'm sure that there are differences, but just in the sense of like, as far as the speed goes, I would just go for your own personal preference. I feel like I have found that I like the ones that cure faster just because I'm an impatient person. But I feel like maybe if you're starting off and you're kind of nervous, having something that cures slower could be good because maybe if you run into any like trouble or like mistakes, then you would probably have more time to fix them. Like when I was making the silicone molds for some of them, I was using something that cured slower and I made a mistake where I didn't like seal my little like prison, like my little box properly. And so it was like leaking out and that was super stressful. But I guess the good thing is that because it cured so slowly, like I was able to see that and then more or less fix it. Potentially, if it had cured faster, then it could have just, that could have happened and I might not have been able to make the adjustments and kind of like recover it. So it's all personal preference. But I personally like the stuff that cures faster. So overall, I do feel like the models translated pretty well from the molds, but the only thing that happened that I was a little bummed out by is that the whiskers just didn't translate. Like no matter what I did, they just whenever I made the mold, they would just never really come out. So that was kind of a bummer, but I think it might just be like using this method, like it might not be the best for making little tiny details like that. But that's okay. So after all of the molds came out and I was pretty happy with them, I went through a pretty big phase of experimentation with these when it came to picking out colors. Right now, I was trying this really vivid, vibrant orange and it just didn't really feel accurate to me. Like I didn't dislike the color, but it just didn't really feel true to Dorito because he's kind of like a paler orange, and so I did want it to be vivid, but this orange just seemed like a bit too much. I ended up doing 3 different tests of color, and the one that I ended up going with was the palest orange just because I thought the color was unique and I felt that it fit the best. Dorito. Dorito. that I was trying to figure out how to do is have the face, the ear shadow, and the stripes go on in a pretty uniform way. So the first thing that I did is that I made stencils of them, of the eyes and then also the stripes, and then printed them and then used my sticker cutter to cut them out, thinking that, oh, maybe I could just like put them over, and then having that kind of guideline would make it look more uniform. And that didn't really work too well, which was unfortunate. So this was a trial and error with lots of error. Eventually what I found did work, at least for the stripes on the tail and the back, was using this water-based decal paper. So the process is pretty much the same as what I said earlier, where it's just making a mock-up, printing it out, and then cutting it. But the difference with these is that what you do with them is you, after you cut out whatever shape you want, you put it in water for like 30 seconds and then you can apply it to the surface of whatever you're using. Definitely just with this paper, be a bit careful just because it is a bit delicate. There were a couple times that I did tear it before, but I did find that this worked the best. I feel like the color was pretty natural, and I feel like it just added this level of uniformity to these hand painted figures. So I just know myself, and I know that I would not have been able to accurately recreate all of those stripes in each one. So this just ended up being a much better option. And then as far as the face went, I just tried to be as precise as I possibly could, going back over it in white and black a couple times. Just really, this was just me doing the best I could. And I feel like overall it worked pretty well. I think maybe in the future, if I was to model them again, I would make some aspects easier to kind of follow along with a paintbrush. Instead of using the decals, I could extrude the stripes out just a little bit, just the smallest amount, so you could have that little extra dimension, and then you could paint them pretty uniformly because you have that guideline. After all of the stripes are on, after all of the facial features were the way that I wanted them, I sealed all of them with a sealing spray just to give them the slightest bit of a glossy finish. And yeah, here are all of them side by side, my first exploration into making blind boxes, and it was really cool. I definitely learned a lot from this process. I think that they look really good for my first time and learning so many new skills. I definitely think that adding the sealer on the end was a good choice. It does add the slightest bit of shine, and I feel like it kind of brings all of them together. So overall, I think that this experience was definitely very much a learning experience. It was cool to kind of dive into something that, like, for so long had just kind of mystified me. Like, I just didn't, I don't know, I just conceptually did not understand like how you could do it. So it's cool to kind of like understand and have like a basic like working knowledge of this stuff. That being said, I do think I do have this list here of probably how I would approach things differently. So I would say like maybe if this is your first, if this is something that you're doing for the first time, hopefully some of these things can like maybe cut down on some of these like mistakes or like learning processes that I had to go through. So if I was to do the process again, not so much like the mold making or casting process, I'm sure that there are things there I could do differently, but I think overall that was like successful enough for me to be like okay with the results, or like happy with the results, like more than okay. But so essentially, if I was starting with just like a base figure, like hypothetically, like this pigeon, like if I made a resin mold of it and I popped it out of the mold, what I would probably do is I would spray it with this gray spray paint. I don't have it with me right now, but I'll like put it somewhere here. But essentially, what it's supposed to do is it kind of fills in any sort of little like gaps or creases. It can just kind of make the surface a bit more uniform to work with. It's not like a perfect like fix all, but I feel like it can kind of even out a couple like minor little imperfections. So yes, spraying it with that, seeing what it does, and then from there doing a bit of a back and forth process of like spraying it with this gray spray paint, doing some sanding and like aesthetic fixing. Sometimes like maybe the bottoms are a little uneven, or maybe there's like a gap where like a bubble was or something. So just kind of really making sure that it is in the best shape. So yeah, just kind of going back and forth between like spray painting it, sanding it, spray painting again until you feel happy with it. So once you feel that the surface is like prepped, this is an optional step, or you can kind of modify this to whatever it is you're making. But after doing that, since the figure is gray and a lot of Dorito figures were white, so I then spray painted it just with a regular like white spray paint, which I will also put up here somewhere. From there, I would probably just like move slower. I think that what happened with me was like I was like, "Oh my God, like this is such a cool new skill." And then I just made like a bunch of molds, and like that's not necessarily like wrong per se, but I think like looking at it now, I kind of wish that maybe I had only made like one or two at first and then really went through and like made sure that the follow through process was better, because I do really like how they turned out. I think it was like I definitely think that they look very cute and I'm happy with them, but I would eventually like to have them be like sold, still like handmade and everything, but I just feel I don't know, like they to be like might need to like step them up a little bit before I would like feel great about selling them. So I think maybe if I had kind of honed in my process down to just like two or three figures instead of just making a bunch of them because I found out that I could, I think that that might have served me better and it might serve you better possibly, but again, I don't think it's like it was a wrong thing to do. It's just with my current financial situation, it probably would have been smarter if I just did it a little bit at a time and like really made sure that it was like how I wanted. Um anyway, but for the Doritos specifically, after spray painting the figure white, then I would probably lay down the orange coat, just going a little slower, like trying to minimize however I could like the paint lines and just like something that looks like overly textured. I feel like it will naturally have some paint texture just because it is a hand painted figure, but I can probably just be neater at painting. So yes, doing that like base coat, and then waiting until all of that is kind of how I want it before moving on to adding the little like eyes and mouth details. And then yeah, the little shadows on the ears and stuff like that, and then just spray painting them and then calling it done. So yeah, I don't know. I hope that this was somewhat helpful in some way or at least entertaining. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, for staying through this quite long video. But yeah, thank you. Bye.